Arizona's economy is based on 5 C's. One of those is climate, but it may be changing to cactus.
Arizona actually is in the top 5 of all 50 states for visitor spending of national parks.
The military and defense are also bringing big dollars into the state.
We're looking at nearly $500 million in state and local tax revenue from that activity. So it's a big deal.
Arizona's economy, changes in where the money comes from could be in the wind. This is Arizona Week. Hello and welcome to Arizona Week. I'm Christopher Conover in for Lorraine Rivera. This week, Arizona budget writers got some good news. Revenue collections for the month of April were much greater than forecast. Some of that's because income taxes were due. But those in state government who watch the state's wallet say if the increased revenue trend continues, Arizona may not have to dip into its rainy day fund to keep the budget in the black. Revenue collections for the state come not only from income taxes, but also from business taxes and the money visitors spend. The snowbird season is over, but summer vacations are right around the corner. New reports show that when it comes to economic drivers, cactus, or more correctly, visitors to national parklands in Arizona, are making big contributions to state coffers. Beautiful day here at Saguaro National Park in southern Arizona. Big tourism place, but not only in the winter. This is a year-round tourism place and a big economic driver for southern Arizona.
Absolutely. National parks across the nation are big economic drivers because people love to go to their national parks. And so here in Saguaro National Park, we see approximately 674,000 visitors. That's how many we had last year. And the people that come here spend about $41 million in visitor spending. The park also supports about 610 jobs, and the total economic benefit of that visitor spending and economic jobs and all the other associated kind of complex workings end up in a total economic benefit of $58 million just to the local area of Tucson. So the National Park Service is a big part of ensuring the nation is definitely an economic driver.
And Saguaro is an interesting park. It's almost an urban park. It's in 2 units in southern Arizona, an east and a west. We're in the east right now, but it surrounds Tucson, so it really does drive people across town, but also in and out of town.
Absolutely. The west district of the park actually receives the majority of the visitation, probably about 2/3 of the visitation, due to the proximity of it being closer to the interstate and other attractions over there with the Desert Museum and old Tucson studios and that sort of thing. But over here on the east side, we have an incredible diversity of resources. It's being the equivalent of walking from Mexico to Canada. So you're going from elevations of around 2,800 feet up to, in the background you see there, the top elevation of the park here on the east side is near 9,000 feet.
Because this is an urban park, or is right next to Tucson, does it get a lot more day use than it does people coming here for the purpose of visiting Saguaro, or is it more the people who live here coming to ride bikes? I know especially here on the east side, riding bikes through the park is very popular, or is it a mix?
It is a mix. We do see an amazing amount of local folks that really love their national park, and the local folks use the park, both districts, year-round. The trail runners, the bike riders, the equestrian users, the people love their parks and they're here. You see them every day. We do receive visitors from, as you know, across the country and across the world, and that visitation picks up, as you might suspect, typically in the wintertime, fall, winter, and the busiest season for us is the spring, which is just coming to a conclusion now.
Of course, southern Arizonans know Saguaro National Park, but the big kid on the block, at least in Arizona, is Grand Canyon. But the parks as a whole contribute a lot to the state economy, not just Tucson or the Grand Canyon.
Absolutely. Arizona actually is in the top 5 of all 50 states for visitor spending of national parks. So, and a lot of that is because of the Grand Canyon, but there's so many other national parks here. There are actually 22 national park units in the state, and they include Saguaro, they include Tumacacre National Historical Park, Casa Grande, National Monument, those are within an hour's drive of Tucson. So because of the number of parks here and because of the excellent weather in the wintertime, it sees a lot of visitation. As I mentioned, we're in the top 5 across the entire United States. The visitor spending is $837 million in the state, and that supports 13,000 jobs in Arizona. And the actual total economic benefit of that is $1.2 billion. So we're a big, big player.
Do you find people, especially in the winter, come down to southern Arizona, hit Saguaro or Tumacacori, and then work their way north, or vice versa, all the way up to the Grand Canyon? Do we see a lot of that type of activity?
Actually, most of the winter and spring visitors are focused in the southern Arizona area. I think they fly into Phoenix for conferences, they fly into Tucson for conferences, lots of visitation from Mexico as well. So I think that winter visitation is primarily focused around the southern Arizona parks, but we do get some overflow from Grand Canyon, of course. It's just that those two climates are so, different that they're kind of different seasons, really.
When it comes to parks in Arizona as a whole, really even the nation as a whole, but really Arizona, are we seeing an increase in visitors, a decrease, is it flat?
We actually have seen a significant increase. Just this year alone, we're about 35% above the same time last year. So I think that's for a number of factors, but one of the things we're really going to be focusing on in the next year and a half, the National Park Service celebrates its centennial in 2016. And we've actually already started to celebrate. We really want to bring visibility to national parks, everything from, the Yellowstones and the Grand Canyons to the lesser known parks that are right in your backyard. One of the initiatives as part of the 2016 centennial is something called the Urban Agenda. And the National Park Service has realized that it's very important to connect urban communities with national parks. And that is due because 80% of the park visitation, National Park Service visitation, come from cities. So interestingly, Tucson and Saguaro National Park are one of 10 national parks and cities that have been chosen across the entire United States as an urban focus. So that is going to be something that you'll be hearing a lot more about in the coming months, is our urban agenda to try to connect more closely the community of Tucson and Saguaro National Park, as well as the Anza Trail, which is another National Park Service unit here on the west side.
And if I remember correctly, Arizona and national parks, I mean, we are really the poster child for it. Other than California, we have more national parks or national park land units than anybody else, correct?
Absolutely, yes. Next to California, we are the second most units, 22 national park units, and they range from the Grand Canyon Parashant up in the northwest corner of Arizona, very, very remote on the north end of the Grand Canyon, to Casa Grande Ruins National Monument, a cultural park that really looks at the history and archaeology of our area, to Saguaro, to Chiricahua, Coronado, Fort Bowie, and the far southeastern part of the state. So there's an incredible amount of diversity in terms of natural resources and in terms of history and Arizona heritage that Arizonans should be very proud to go out and find their park.
Arizona is home to 3 branches of the U.S. military. The Air Force, Army, and Marines all have bases and training facilities here. There's also a strong military-industrial complex with companies like Raytheon and Boeing acting as major economic forces. Zach Ziegler sat down with economist Jim Rounds to talk about the impact the military and its related industries have on Arizona coffers.
Jim, Phoenix, Tucson, Yuma, Sierra Vista all have military bases as well as National Guard units. How important are the armed services to Arizona's economy?
It's a big deal, and it's a big deal for a number of reasons. If you just want to look at raw numbers, we're looking at around 50,000 jobs across the state, and that doesn't include other companies like Raytheon and others that provide additional business activities related to defense. But we're looking at around 50,000 jobs, maybe just a little bit less. About 2/3 of those are in the Tucson area, and we're looking at nearly $500 million in state and local tax revenue from that activity. So it's a big deal, and the reason that I think it's a bigger deal now than even before when a lot of these numbers were tabulated, it's we're at risk of losing some of these jobs. These tend to be higher paying jobs. And so when you lose a high paying job, you don't just lose that job where some researcher is making $100,000 a year. You lose that job at, say, a Walmart. You lose that job at the supplier company. So you end up maybe losing 2 or 3 jobs total. So it's something we have to pay attention to, and it has a particular concern, at least for me, in the southern Arizona and Tucson area, because that economy is more dependent on these jobs than other parts of the state and other parts of the country.
And you mentioned kind of the military-industrial complex, companies like Raytheon here in Tucson. Boeing is another one that in the Phoenix area. How important are companies like those to the economic contribution?
Well, they're critical because they're base sector jobs, which means, and this is also true for the federal government jobs, a base sector job is what drives the economy. That's when money comes in from the outside, it bounces around the economy, and that's where you hear about that multiplier effect where one job really becomes demand for 3. And then you lose that money when you import other goods and services into the area. So it's basically the economic driver. And when you have a high-paying base sector job, like the military jobs and the research and manufacturing jobs, it has a bigger impact on the economy. It brings in additional economic activity. It creates demand for all of the other areas that we often talk about in terms of employment growth. But when you lose those, it's hard to fill that void. So you lose a $100,000 a year job, and with this particular recovery, you might fill it back in with a $40,000 a year job. That's not, you lose a job, you gain a job. That doesn't mean that we're even. Quality does matter, and these tend to be high quality jobs. And we have to pay attention to this a little bit more than maybe we have in the past.
And is it dangerous to rely on military spending in general? I mean, the job of military spending is not to drive the economy, it is to protect the country. Is this a dangerous thing to rely on?
Well, and so I wouldn't say it's dangerous. It's part of our economic base. This is what has made our economic base for many decades. But what we have to start paying attention to, and I think we noticed it more after the last downturn, which was severe and it impacted Arizona more than almost every other state in the country, is that we need to have a more diverse economy over a longer period of time, because if you're disproportionately dependent on something that might be driven by politics, it might be driven by fiscal issues in Washington, D.C., where there's new problems coming up every month or every even week for that matter, we may be at risk of losing these jobs. It's not just private sector driven, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to try to maintain those jobs or even expand it. What we have to do is work on diversifying our economy, but realizing who we are. And who we are is an economy that is dependent on these jobs. So our congressional delegation, policymakers at the local level, policymakers at the state level, all have to work hard on making sure that Arizona is a strong hub for doing the research and development for the military.
And you mentioned those jobs. Tell me a bit about what kind of jobs tend to come from being reliant on military spending. Are they high-quality jobs, low-quality jobs, or are they fairly well a mix?
In Arizona, and I think this is true for a lot of other areas, they tend to be higher paying. So federal government jobs, especially as it relates to defense, tend to be higher paying, well above average pay for a particular state. When you get into research and development, so you go to areas like Fort Huachuca and others, you wind up with higher paying R&D jobs that could end up creating additional smaller industries down the road. So there's even spin-off benefits when you see additional military spending. But the key is to not just say we want to maintain the jobs that we've had in the past. We want to try to maintain those jobs. So if somebody's considering cutting a job here versus, say, Virginia, then we might have to do some lobbying in the congressional delegation. The policymakers have to get involved to protect that job, especially in the Tucson area. But we also have to try to encourage additional industries that might be tangential to these research and development jobs that might appear in aerospace. And so you end up, an economy isn't just based on an area like research and development as it has to do with the defense industry. It's made up of that as a core, but then there's all sorts of other industries that use similar workforce, use similar business inputs, and then those are easier to develop in an area. So it's the direct jobs related to the military spending, it's those spin-off jobs related to suppliers and then people spending the money throughout the economy, and then it's new industry development, which I know the economic developers across the state and also in the Tucson area are working hard on, because you have these people that have a skill set. Let's try to take advantage of that moving forward, and let's see if we can backfill some of those lost jobs in other areas.
You've mentioned Arizona's congressional delegation now a couple of times and how important they can be to keeping these jobs. How have they been doing? Do they seem to show that they know this is a major issue for the state?
Yeah, well, 3 or 4 years ago, one of the biggest criticisms that at least we had, and we brought it up whenever we could, is that many members of the congressional delegation didn't even know where Arizona was. But there were a lot of deficiencies in public policy throughout the state for many years. But going through that severe downturn, I think has caused everybody to educate themselves a little bit more on what makes an economy tick, pay attention to these things more. So I think the congressional delegation is doing a much better job than in the past on focusing on how do we protect our military corps, the research and development. How can we expand that? How can we maybe get federal government infrastructure monies to come in to pay for the roads that are also needed to expand these types of businesses? So I would say they've made significant improvements compared to where we were just 2 or 3 years ago.
All right. Jim Rounds, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Arizona's climate and military bases make the state an ideal place for veterans to retire. Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick is working with colleagues in Washington to protect those vets. Congresswoman, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Let's begin with one of the reasons you're in southern Arizona is the opening of Fisher House, a very unique place for veterans who need care to take their family, and a big deal for your district.
It really is a big deal, and I was there for the groundbreaking this morning. They had a little ceremony. I spoke a little bit. But you know, CD1, Congressional District 1, is a very large rural district, and a lot of the veterans have to come here to Tucson to get their care, leave their families, pay for a hotel or motel overnight, and now they'll be able to bring their families with them, stay at the Fisher House. It's just a remarkable concept, and it's really gratifying to see the community come together and support it.
It's much like the Ronald McDonald House is for kids, but this is for veterans.
This is for veterans.
Let's talk about some veteran legislation. We had the problems last year at the Veterans facility in Phoenix, still working our way through the cleanup on that. You sponsored the Whistleblower and Patient Protection Act, which hopefully will avoid problems like the ones we saw in Phoenix.
You know, the whistleblowers really demonstrated a lot of courage coming forward. We would not have known what was going on had they not done that. But they also risk retaliation in the system. So what my legislation does is it provides an outside group that they can report to, and then that information goes directly to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. And so it doesn't have to go to their immediate supervisor, and on up that chain, it sort of diverts it outside of the system. Because it's, you know, we need to know what's going on. And, you know, people at the VA really care about the work they're doing for veterans. They want our veterans to be treated well, and we need them to come forward if there are problems.
A lot of your district, District 1, includes Native nations, especially the Navajo Reservation. Yet they have trouble getting to VA facilities. A lot of veterans live up on the various reservations. You have a bill that helps them get to nursing homes.
Yes, yes. So there's no nursing home for them. And, you know, they're a very tight-knit family and extended family. And it's really sad that the veterans have to leave their community, their home, their land, their family, and be put in a nursing home somewhere that's very foreign to them. So that's a really important piece of legislation that's near and dear to my heart.
And if I understand, part of the problem is the reservations can't get the money from the VA, but this bill would change some of that.
It would change it. It actually would open it up across the country, so we could have tribal nursing homes on tribal land.
Third one you did regarding veterans, the Cybersecurity Protection Act, which then again goes to healthcare, but protecting information, yet at the same time keeping it open so doctors know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard a lot about privacy concerns. And certainly for our veterans, we need to make sure that their medical information is protected. That legislation is very important to me.
And this applies to the VA, not to the hospitals in general.
That's correct.
Let's switch gears. You have also a lot of forest land. Arizona, we have a lot of forest land, and it's the time of year where we start really thinking about wildfires. The Forest Restoration Initiative is moving along. That will allow thinning in some of the forests, very important, especially in your district.
You know, it's a collaborative effort with, preventing these horrific wildfires and bringing back the timber industry. And it's moving now. We meet on a regular basis with Good Earth, who is the company that was awarded the contract. They're starting to put in lumber mills. We've run into some stumbling blocks along the way. For instance, I was born in the town of McNairy, which is a timber town, and it was very thriving and economically at that time. But we lost a generation of loggers and mill workers and woodcutters, and so we've had to look at rebuilding that kind of workforce. But we're on the move, and we got a major piece of good information from the Forest Service. They cleared about 600,000 acres out of the million planned for logging and treatment. So yeah, this is a critical time in the forest, and water's always a big issue and a big concern of ours in Arizona.
And this applies mainly to the Coconino, Kaibab, Apache, Sitgreaves, and Tonto National Forest,
correct?
That's
right. That's right. It's a model project, and if it works well, it can be expanded.
I know there were some concerns from environmentalists that the loggers would go in and they take the old growth out and things like that, and it might not be quite so healthy as hoped for in the end. You sound confident that this isn't a problem.
They have been at the table the entire time, and they like this model. And it has multiple facets. So some of it's control burning. They're using various treatment levels in parts of the forest where it makes sense. And so they're pleased with that.
There were concerns at the highest levels. National Forest Management folks have said in congressional committees and down here on the ground that there's just not the money to fight the big wildfires. If we get one, they're going to have to take money from management or somewhere else. Is there any movement in Congress to fix that long term?
There is. So right now, prevention and fire mitigation and fighting fires is in the same bucket. And we're trying to get two buckets, because it saves taxpayers money, and certainly if we do more prevention, we can avoid using the very expensive fighting dollars, and so there's a big push for that right now. It just makes sense.
We're a little more than 100 days into this new Congress. We now have Republicans running both chambers. You've been up there before. This isn't your first rodeo, as it were, in Washington. What's the first 100 days been like?
Well, I have great bipartisan committees. So I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and also Agriculture. And it's really exciting to be on agriculture because that's such an important economic sector in Arizona. And my work and my vision for Arizona is building a strong, diversified, stable economy. So that includes farming, ranching, mining, biotech, bioscience, all of those various industries. So it's been great being on the Agriculture Committee. And we're working in a bipartisan way. So that's the space that I work in Congress, and just try to get things done.
And now the buzz with my colleague, Zach Ziegler. Zach, in recent days, you've spent some time looking at one of the big parts of the defense industry, Raytheon, down here in southern Arizona. They've gotten some big contracts recently.
Yes, nearly $2 billion in March and April in new contracts. Now, that's not just exclusive to that time period. These are multi-year contracts, some of them running as far out as 2018. But yeah, quite a nice influx of income for the second biggest and the largest private employer in southern Arizona.
You also got to speak with the head of Raytheon a couple of weeks ago. It was at an event where a new road is going in to help folks get in and out of Raytheon. And it's something that exemplifies what government, be it local or state, can do to help a big employer. Let's hear what he had to say.
Anything that they can do to attract other high technology industries is good for the region, because that builds up an infrastructure that then promotes our educational infrastructure. Clearly we need a vibrant and healthy university system, a research system that specializes in key areas that we need. We're a technical industry. We need highly trained and qualified workforce. And so all the things that our local leaders can do to help promote that's good for us and it's good for the region.
And Zach, when it comes to helping the region, as you said, Raytheon's the largest private employer in southern Arizona. How much are they putting into the economy?
They're putting quite a bit. Their payroll is about $6.3 billion each year. That's quite a chunk. If you look at the average salary there is about $75,000. That's more than double the average household income in the area. A lot of very high-paying jobs there, which means a lot of money getting pumped into the local economy by those employers. They also have a fair amount of contracts going to other smaller aerospace firms in the area, getting parts for the things that they build. So quite a bit of money getting pumped in of those big contracts that come into Raytheon.
Let's hear from Taylor Lawrence again, talking about the future of Raytheon. Just recently, as you mentioned, $500 million contract. It looks like the future is pretty bright.
Our mission, our job is to make the world a safer place. And if you look around right now, there's a lot going on that's not making it safe. So our products are in high demand, and there's a lot of demand around the world. So we see a lot of opportunity for growth. We see a lot of opportunity to innovate our products, to bring better products to all of our customers, our U.S. warfighting customers, their allies. So there's a lot of real good opportunity to increase the volume of capabilities that we provide to all of our customers worldwide. Because right now it's a very, very dangerous world, and our products are needed.
Zach, as you were saying, the pay at Raytheon is higher than the average area, so that means there's more spending money. They're a big contributor.
Yeah, at $75,000, more than double what a lot of households or the average households making here. That's the kind of money that says, oh, well, you're not necessarily scraping by if you're kind of an average Raytheon employee. You're the type of person who is contributing and kind of having that trickle-down effect. Maybe you're buying a slightly nicer house, you're buying cars, you're going out to local restaurants as opposed to, the quick grab-a-burger type places. It can have a major impact when you talk about kind of that trickle-down style of economics.
All right, Zach, thanks so much for your reporting, and that is our show for this week. I'm Christopher Conover. Thanks for tuning in.